We've got the chair here and we're getting ready to do some repair work on it. This chair in particular is a really nice a Federal chair. The mahogany on it is really old. It's in good condition. It got a little loose though and some of the joints had to be repaired. The only way to correctly do that is to basically disassemble the full chair. You have to be very careful in that process so that you don't split and break the joints. But basically tap it apart with a rubber mallet. Once you get it fully apart, you can clean the old glue off the tenons, the dowels, or whatever may be inside the joints holding it together. And then at that point, you can reinsert glue back into these joints and then reassemble the chair and leave it in clamps overnight. But on this chair in particular, the left arm was broken when I received the chair. You can see the split here. And then there was also a split at the front right style here on the leg. So we're gonna have to go through that and do some cosmetic repair as well. And I'll show you how I do that. In my eyes, if I can see the repair, it's not executed properly. But that being said, we have to pay a lot of respect to the fact that this is a period antique, so we don't want to overdo it. You can see here how the finish has aged a bit, and we don't want to disturb that too much. That's not what we were hired to do. And then the other break that we have to address is here. This area was split and broken and pulled off, and we've glued and clamped it back into place, but it's going to require some cosmetic repairs in order to get that done properly. So there's a methodology to which I like to approach these. And typically, it's going to be a burn-in. And I'll show you how to do a burn-in. So the way we handle repairs like this cosmetically, it's called a burn-in. It's an old method for filling scratches, gouges, cracks. It's not very stable as far as structurally speaking, but it is a fantastic way to make a cosmetic repair. So it's done typically with either an alcohol lamp like you see here. They also have electronic knife heaters which you can use. And then so also we have what is called burn-in knives. They have lots of styles of these. You can buy these from Mohawk Finishing. It's a fantastic company. A lot of professionals use them in the industry. So essentially the idea behind this is that you're going to use the heat from the lamp, as we have here, to heat your knives, and we are going to melt a lacquer resin stick into the void on these. These come in lots of different colors. There's actually more colors than anybody could possibly ever want to use. But typically I buy amber colored sticks. You can work with these. It's nice to have some mahogany colored sticks as well, which is pretty common with the antiques. They also, another couple colors that I like to personally have are black, of course, because every once in a while you have some black lacquer. This is a great repair for black lacquer because the color's already in there. And then other colors that I like to keep around are typically a teak oak type shade. And sometimes I keep gold as well. So in any event, this type of repair is really easy. You can easily overdo this though. I've seen that happen a lot. It's the biggest mistake people make when doing these types of repairs is that they use way too much lacquer. You need very little lacquer to actually execute a repair like this, but you're gonna have to have a few things. You either need a rag around to clean off the excess from your burn-in knives, or you need a piece of sandpaper to wipe, because the way this functions is very simple. The lacquer resin will stick to about any surface. However, if you get the surface slightly wet, it will pull off and it won't stick to it. So typically, I know it's a little gross, but we'll use a little finger spit. You put it across the surface here and that will take off the excess. So the way I would do this is I take one hot knife, and if the knife heat is important too, you kind of have to just get a feel for it. Sometimes if the lacquer bubbles and melts when you hit the knife to it, it's probably too hot. You want it to melt, but at a slow rate. You don't want it to be too hot. So here's our crack here. We'll start on one side. We're gonna do each surface separately. So I'm gonna put a bit of lacquer here and I'm gonna smooth it right across, just like you're spreading putty on, say, drywall or something to that effect. So here we go. We're gonna take a little bit of the lacquer. It's gonna balance on my knife. I'm gonna push it on and then I'm gonna pull it flat this way. And we're gonna do this until we get the crack filled in. Once the crack's filled in, then we'll remove the excess from the surface. And the knives are going to be cooling quickly as you go, so once the knife cools and it's no longer moving the lacquer the way you like, you wipe it off, put it right back on your heat source, and come back with your next knife. And I'm going to be pulling the lacquer across this gouge again. Really nice smooth lines. I'm not holding it still. You have to keep it moving across the surface. Otherwise, you're just going to make a mess. So you'll notice I'm licking my finger. I'm putting it across here and slowly pulling all this off. And then I'll smooth that out like that. And then I always feel it to see if I've missed anything. If I have missed anything, I'll have to go back, fill it again. And then we're gonna do the other surface as well. So now that I've got this surface cleaned out, what we're gonna do is the front surface here, we're gonna smooth that out, and then I'll probably tip the chair over to get to the inside surface here. Normally, an operation like this, to get this filled, it takes about 5 minutes, tops. It's not a very involved process. It doesn't take really long to do it properly. So we're gonna repeat the process all over again. Making sure that my lacquer is not too hot, and starting on one side and pulling directly across to the other side, as smoothly as possible. Okay. And then we're gonna wipe off the excess here, put my knife back on here, and we're gonna make sure that this cools for just a second. It's easier if it's colder. And coming across that as smooth as possible. And you're gonna get the excess is gonna go to the right and left side of the knife. It just kind of runs around the knife. But the idea is to get most of it smooth, and then I'll do this kind of over, back and forth like that. The idea is to get it as close as possible. You don't want to leave a lot of excess on the surface because that means you're going to have to do more sanding than you want to do. And especially with these old finishes, we don't want to do too much sanding and disturb the finish. The idea is to disturb the finish as least as possible. All right, so that looks really good. Hopefully we get a close-up on that right there. Okay, and we have one more surface left, and then this will be completely filled, and then after it's filled, we can do the smoothing it out and touching up the finish. So we're gonna repeat the process one final time on this third surface here. A little bit of lacquer, straight across. And now that it's filled, I'm basically just gonna pull off any excess. I'm gonna take my knife off the heat because I'm not gonna be using it at this point. Actually, now that we got that filled, we can actually go ahead, since our knives are hot, we'll tackle this front here where this crack was as well. This is the same process. This one has less area affected, which is fantastic. It's basically just right here in the front. There's a bit here under the seat, but the way it is glued up is it's extremely tight. You don't see it. So I'll probably just put a small amount of wax in there. You won't really even see the ridge because it's smooth at the touch. There is a little bit right here where the fibers were broken out and they're missing. So we're gonna smooth that out, and then we're just gonna run a little bit of lacquer right across this seam there so that when we polish all up, it's nice and seamless. There will be no snags, no splinters or anything that's gonna get stuck on your clothes or somebody's rag for cleaning this chair in the future. So again, I'll just start here at the top. Actually, this is probably easier to lay this down and let gravity do its thing. So I'm gonna start here on the top. As a matter of fact, you know what's great for a situation like this, I don't have one right handy, is there are curved knives that work a little better. Maybe I'll pull one out in a few minutes. They're curved knives. These are flat, plain knives like this. And there are curved knives that you can use that will help on a curved surface. The domed surfaces aren't so bad. The convex ones, the concave ones on the other hand, it's a little tricky to do a fill on a convex surface rather, with a flat blade, as you can imagine. All right, so in here, we're just gonna work this lacquer into this small chip. And again, less is always best. We don't wanna overdo this. And little bit down here, and right there on that front edge. And again, using some moisture to remove the excess. This right here, this interior, is the tricky part with this one. So it requires a soft touch to get this properly executed. And honestly, I would like, let me find my other knife. I would like my other knife on this because it's gonna make the end result a lot better. The problem I have, okay, so that's good. All right, so again, gonna just wipe this off with alcohol, get all that oil off of the surface. Wow, that mahogany really pops when you hit it with some alcohol. Looks good. This chair would look really nice. French polish, I love this Honduran mahogany. Okay. So now we're gonna clean this up and do the repairs, the cosmetic repairs, but there's a few other small things that I'm gonna address. I am gonna go over this with some light steel wool. Use a 4/0 steel wool, which essentially means 4-0 steel wool. It's the finest steel wool that you can purchase. And I'm just gonna wipe off some of the glue residue from the clamps. I use a wood-based glue, which is water soluble, so you can always clean it off with a damp cloth as you're clamping. But in most cases, you can't get all the glue off because the clamps are in the way. So you're always gonna be left with a small amount of residue that you'll just have to clean off later. And sometimes you can get it off with a fingernail or a flat blade if you're careful. You don't want to gouge or scratch the surface, but you can sometimes get in here. And as a matter of fact, let's make sure this blade is nice and flat before we get too much into this. And again, I'm just feeling this to make sure that I'm taking off glue residue and not finish, because the two tend to blend into one another. Now, if I had to get aggressive, I'll show you for example's sake, I wouldn't recommend doing this yourself. You can take a piece of sandpaper if you absolutely had to and sand this slightly, and you'll start to see where the glue is there. But again, I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you're really good with replacing your finishes. So, all right, that's good. That side feels good. This front feels pretty good. I'll check here. Everywhere I put a clamp. Here I can see you see the dust sort of exposes that glue. You can see where it was. And I'm just gonna work this off a bit as best I can. The idea is to keep it smooth and not disturb the original finish very much. There it goes. See that? Big piece there. There you go. Okay, that's good. Back is good. This is good. And one last area here. This was a pre-existing break that I didn't repair, so I'm not going to address this, but there is a small crack right here. That's tight, it's just a cosmetic crack that was already repaired. Okay. So now that our chair's been glued, filled, it's ready for some finish work. That's the next step. That's because that's where we sanded the finish and blended this in. And a lot of antiques, especially with wood, the wood has a tendency to cup, twist and bow and do all sorts of things. I mean, wood is essentially a very dense sponge. It's very susceptible to changes in the humidity and everything in the environment. So it's very difficult at times when something's been cracked and broken for a long time to get it back exactly the way it was. And that was the case here. This break had happened quite some time ago and had never been properly repaired. And so now we're just trying to get that through. So I got a nice coat there. You can see here that we have some lacquer on there. So what we're gonna do is just a minor touch up using a few pigments here. So here's a color palette that I work with. Keep some other colors. I don't use a ton of different shades. So essentially, I'm gonna dip my pencil brush here into the padding lacquer to get a sort of a transfer agent or a base, I guess, to work with. And then we're gonna dip into these colors to get sort of the desired effect. And this requires a fair amount of adjustment as you go, but you just want a general color to work with. Amount of color as possible. I never want to use a lot of color because it'll sit on top of the repair and it'll stand out and like a sore thumb, I feel like. So it's always best to just go with as little as you absolutely have to. And some of the tricks that I like to employ are to color over the actual brakes if you can afford to do so and make it hide. So then I'll come back over this with a lighter shade and address this crack right here. And it's best if you keep your brush strokes looking sort of like a grain pattern. You don't want to overdo it. That even seems a little aggressive, but I can tone it down the next step. It's always best to keep in mind to remember that when you're doing these types of repairs, you have to do it in small stages. It's not a one size fits all, you wipe it on, it's done. You kind of have to build it up as you go. It's a bit of a work of art. So if you've got that looking fairly reasonable and you like it, you could stop there and then start to lacquer over it. This one, to me, I need to now draw back down over top of these lighter colors. So I'm going to put a couple little hash grains in here to sort of dilute, if you were, this lighter shade I just put in. And trying to match the sort of mahogany grain pattern that's already there. Sometimes with mahogany you have what I like to refer to as a color pitch. It's got a very translucent color that shifts as you walk around it, depending on how the light is cascading across the surface. So sometimes when you make these repairs, they look really great from one angle, but they stand out like a sore thumb from the other angle. So it's better to walk around your repair and have a look at it in different lighting situations. So now we're gonna tackle the front here. You can see this line here is pretty obvious. You can see there was a break there. So our job is going to be to minimize the look of that break. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to add a little bit more color on this part than I would initially like to, but it's okay, it's all gonna work out. And so I'm going to just see with this first. That's already too dark. So let me change my color tones here a bit. It's better. So you'll notice I'm using my finger, my back finger here as a guide to sort of help keep my hand stable, because I'm trying to reproduce this sort of grain line here that goes like this up the rail. And I like the way this looks already. This doesn't really need much more than that. Okay, and I'm gonna reposition this. This will blend in really great once we get the other colors in there and more lacquer in it. And now if we reposition this, I don't know if we can get the camera to catch this. You'll see we have the same issue here on this piece as well, and it's going to be the same fix. This angle's terrible. I can't see what I'm doing here. I'm gonna come around this back side here. Maybe I can see it better. isn't allowing me to get in there with my brush the way I would like. Okay. Anyway, there we go, we got some coverage. All right, now, what we're gonna have to do at this point is seal that down. So we have some color on there and we have our lacquer on there, but what you're gonna run into now is it's gonna dry, it's gonna look dull, and you're gonna see the brush strokes. So in order to eliminate that problem, you need to bury it in some lacquer. There's a few ways to do this. Most furniture touch-up guys at this point would probably go straight to an aerosol can like you see here. They'd probably use a product like this, which is not a bad product, but in some cases you do have to use these. I'm not knocking them. They work great in a pinch. It'll help seal that down, but I think what I'm gonna try to do instead of that is I'm gonna try to just pad right over this with some more Qualisol and feather it in that way, as opposed to using the aerosol. So the trick with that though is you have to be very cautious and prevent from wiping off the work you just applied to the chair. So again, very gentle, soft application, just a couple of wipes over top of it first, just to sort of get a coat over top. Being very gentle with this. And we'll get this inside as well. Now, if your color looks good and you're done there, that's great. Consider yourself lucky. In most instances, it's not going to be done right there. You still have to feather it in just a little bit. Remember what I said about layering. So there's typically 2 to 3 more steps you can take to hide this repair further. If you want to at this point, what you can do is put some of your powdered pigments on top of your rag or directly on your finger, and then apply them that way directly to this. The brush strokes work great, but the problem with the brush strokes is in many instances they they put a lot of color in there and it's not very smooth. Let's see if we're still on this here. So I'm going to come back over this here and put some more of these grain lines back in this because it looks as though they've changed slightly. And then primarily I'm putting the grain lines over top of my brush strokes in an attempt to camouflage it further. The next thing that we can do here, like I said, is to simply apply some, now I'm dabbing my finger directly into my colors, and I'm gonna rub the dry powder right over top of this repair, just like that. Now, right now it's just powder sitting on there, so I'm gonna take my rag and gently wipe over top of it with the idea that the lacquer will pick it up and help bear it. And again, you have to be very cautious with this. And the other trick that you can also employ is to put the color directly onto your rag. And you can do that as well. If you blend 2 colors over top, you kind of get the same pigment. And now I'm going to step into the shot here and see if I can get the right angle on this. Get it in there. And so we're just gently rubbing this over top of that. Now, as this is doing this, I can see it's pulling off almost too much color here. So before I get too far with that, I'm going to stop. I'll put a couple grain lines in there. Okay, and we're going to do the same to the front here. This front I feel like looks pretty good already. Could probably use a tiny, tiny bit of tone on this to maybe help draw in this, what I'd call muddy color we got going on there. And the same on this back side. Same there. That actually looks like it needs some red. It looks a little muddy. And the most common mistake I see with people when they do the touch-ups is they use too much orange. They want a light tone, so they go with orange, and orange it just ruins the repair. All right, so I'm being very patient with myself with this. Okay. All right, and then if you look at the front here where we did this repair, this one's blended in really, really well without much of any repair work necessary. We're right there. You can see this small line here was actually not even our crack. That's up right here is a mark. This dark mark is actually some previous wear. That's not the crack. The crack was here, up here, and through across that. And as you can see, that hides really well. Don't think it really needs much of anything to blend in. I certainly wouldn't waste a lot of time on this, especially if you're doing this as a business, and time is money in businesses. So you want to do your best job. Again, remember, less is best. If you don't have to do much, then don't do much. It's just, it's good. Now we could touch this up a little bit. Couple lines in there. If you're going to put some color, it doesn't hurt to, even though you're not using much, it doesn't hurt to drag it across the entire area because it kind of creates the effect that that is the normal color tones for that particular area in the wood. All right. Okay, and we're good there. We can stop right there at that. That looks fantastic. I like the look of that. All right, so again, very gentle here. It's really easy to wipe off what you just put on. So being very gentle with this, and gentle with this, and all of that. Okay, so now if this was a piece that my customer wanted me to completely French polish and restore the finish, I would do that. I'd clean a lot of these hand oils off that you see on the, I would clean a lot of these hand oils off. That's what this you're seeing here is. But this is really what helps show the age. This is an 18th century chair. And so you're talking nearly 300 years, well, I guess 280 years or so, of people touching this with their hands. So that's what this is. So really, it's probably better just to leave it. Now, of course, that could be cleaned off. But when it comes to antique collectors, they can be very particular. It's always better to have a good conversation with your client to make sure what their expectations are and that you're delivering upon those expectations. The last thing you want to do is get a client who's really unhappy that you over-repaired their furniture. So that's it in a nutshell. Essentially, this chair is now repaired. The only thing left to do is put the corner blocks back in it and then reattach the seat. The seat on this one is not getting reupholstered. It looks like it was reupholstered at some point, but I can tell it's got horsehair in it, so it is a pretty old upholstery job. But the fabric's in reasonably good shape. It looks nice and clean for the most part, so I don't think there's any need to replace this fabric. But we'll reattach this. And once this lacquer dries, I will put a coat of wax on this chair. I think that's a really nice thing to do. It adds a nice touch. It doesn't really adjust anything. It doesn't adjust the sheen, and it looks really good. Plus, it has a great smell. Antique waxes are fantastic. If you're looking for a great antique wax, check the link in my bio, and I will share to Gilboys UK, who also have a channel here on YouTube. They got a fantastic antique wax. If you're in the market, you should definitely check out their website. Also, if you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, give me some love in the comments section, and if you have any interest in this type of work, let me know. If you're having troubles with this type of work, let me know. I'm happy to talk with you guys and walk you through some of your problems. Or if you have any need to have a consultation, you have some damage, also don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to help you guys. That's what we're here for. So it's been 24 hours since the chair has been basically sitting overnight, and all the lacquer on it that we used and put on it is dry at this point. Everything looked pretty good. Typically, after the next day, if you realize that you got some areas where the lacquer dried in a little bit too much and the brush strokes from the repair are starting to show through, or some of the scratch marks from your sandpaper starting to show through, you'd put a second application of lacquers over that just to blend that in. But since all this dried and it looked really good, the only thing left to do really with this chair, now that you can see that I've got the seat reinstalled back on top of it, which is a really simple process, it just pops right back on with 4 screws. The only thing left to do at this point, if you like, it's sort of not necessary, but I like to add some wax to these. I got a couple waxes here, you can buy these. I like to support people that I know, and Gilboys UK, I know them, not personally of course, but I know them, I've spoken with them via email. We exchange conversation through Instagram. Great guys. They make a really nice wax product. They've been doing it for a long time. Really great packaging, fantastic products, excellent people. I would really highly recommend, if you're going to buy wax, buy it from Gilboys, which I believe they deal on Amazon too, so you don't necessarily have to contact them directly to support them. So that's a great wax. They don't sponsor me, but just so you know. Here's another can that I'm not even sure who the manufacturer of this was. At one point, I've had this can for probably nearly 10 years. It's a Jack Pole English Formula Antique Wax. This was a precursor before I found Gilboys. I'm not even sure, maybe they're associated, I don't know. I've had this can of wax for a really long time. If you can find it, it's a nice wax as well. And then of course here in the States, more commonly is Brie Wax. You can find this in most Ace Hardware stores will carry this. You can buy it on Amazon really easily. But Brie Wax is also a really nice wax. I don't necessarily like Brie Wax quite as much as the Gilboys, if I'm being really honest. But Brie Wax is perfectly good if you can find it locally and you can't get the Gilboys, go with Brie Wax. In any event, so the waxing process is really straightforward. Basically, it's very similar to a car. It's just wax, so it's really not rocket science. You would just basically wipe this stuff on. You're going to give it a few minutes to dry. Maybe 10-15 minutes, and then you just buff it off. And it'll leave a really nice satin sheen on the finish. This chair right here looks really great anyway. I'm not gonna do a ton of wax on this, but we can put on just, I like to put some wax primarily on the legs, not so much the hands, but the legs it's good. The legs on chairs get bumped and bruised quite often, and wax gives a great sort of like just mild layer of protection. It's the same, you know, sort of idea with your car and carnauba wax. You know, you put carnauba wax in your car, and the idea being that, you know, you're going to prevent it from tar from the road and bug debris and things of that nature, because it just adds a small layer of, you know, just some wax. Helps sort of keep the surface protected. So again, just real quickly, this doesn't take long. Again, just once around the block with this stuff. Like that great song from Badly Drawn Boy, Once Around the Block. It's a good one. Not only do I love British furniture, I love British music. Anyway. So, and once I finish this off here, I'll let it sit for just a few minutes, 10 minutes tops, and then I'll come and wipe it off. I personally don't like putting a lot of wax on the arms because the wax can get sticky. And obviously the arm of a chair is the most commonly touched area on a chair, minus the back, of course. So I'm not gonna put any wax down low on the arms here just because I don't like to. But I'll put a little bit over the repaired areas. And down low here as well. But again, not so much in this area here. Of course you can if you like. It's not gonna hurt it. I just don't like to do it. Anyway, so that's it. That's all you gotta do with that. So we're gonna let that sit and dry, and once that's all dry, just wipe it off. And then this chair's ready to go back to the customer. So if you like this type of video, like I said, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's gonna be a lot more content coming that's very similar to this. I'll probably do several tutorials. I think upcoming next, I may do a tutorial on the French polishing a table. I got a lot of tables in here. We'll get to be French polished, and we got a lot of other stuff. So Make sure you check in. I'm always going to give you tips, tricks, and sort of insights to the game on furniture restoration, antiques, antique service, interior design, service to service that industry, and as well as antique collecting and work for other antique dealers. It's a lot of fun doing this type of work. P.S. You got to remember to wipe the wax off. You'll see the excess wax coming off the chair there. It's just a lovely, really lovely sheen on this chair now. This mahogany looks amazing. This is a really great period chair from the late 18th century, possibly early 19th century. I would say this chair was most likely manufactured sometime between 1760 and 1800. Gorgeous. Let you guys have a look at this. Absolutely gorgeous. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you around.